Hey folks, Ariel over here. Today I wanted to do a little update on water glassing eggs. People call this different things. That's the most common term I hear. Also could be called lime pickling. There is a form of water glassing that's something different, but eggs preserved in lime. So I've done several videos on this in the past, and I want to do an update because this particular jar of eggs, I don't know if the camera can read the date on it, is now exactly 2 years plus 1 day old as I'm filming this. So we're going to see how they're doing. I did a video on doing this, which I'm not going to fully repeat. I did a video checking in on this jar of eggs, I believe, when they were 1 year old. In between then, at which point, the 1 year old point, I couldn't tell any difference when I cracked an egg between that and one that was laid this morning. I checked in on them myself. I don't have a video of that at 20 months. So that was 4 months ago, and I pulled 9 eggs out of here and cracked them. 6 of the 9 kept their yolk. You could have fried them as a sunny side up or anything else with an egg. And 3 of them had gotten, the membrane had aged enough in there that the yolk split. So you would have had to do something like scramble them or put them in a cake or make a custard or any other things you might do with eggs. But the yolk didn't stay perky anymore. So that was 1/3 exactly is how that worked out at 20 months in. So I'm curious to see what they are like today. So when you open a jar like this, there'll be a little bit of usually a layer of lime kind of floating up on the surface. And I just use a spoon to pull one out of the water. You can rinse the extra lime off the shell, but all that is in here is water, pickling lime, which is hydrated lime. There are different kinds of lime. Some of them will like dissolve your skin and stuff, so you do want to get hydrated lime or pickling lime. And then we're just going to see how this holds up. Get my little collection container for our eggshells here. So I have not checked on any of these for 4 months. That one, the yolk held beautifully. Now the reason to do this is a time of year when if you have your own chickens, or even if you don't, if you have access to getting eggs from a local farmer or something like that. I know commercial egg production is having lots of issues with getting eggs to people, so it's not necessarily a good time to do this if you need to buy eggs that way. But if you have your own chickens, in the spring naturally is when chickens start to lay prolifically, because that's when birds lay eggs and nest and so on. So if you have your own birds or access to somebody who has spares, which often happens at this time of year, that yolk also held perfectly. This is an excellent time of year to do this. So chickens lay excessive amounts, and to some degree ducks and other birds, of eggs at this time of year. And then they will have other times of year where they are slower. When they're doing things like molting, which is growing new feathers, that takes a lot of energy. They lay a lot less eggs. During the middle of winter, because of cold, shorter daylight hours, all that kind of stuff, they lay less eggs. So it's often beneficial if you can save some of the extra of the plenty times of year for the slow times of year. That one, the yolk just cracked. Not badly. I might have even nicked it with the shell as I was doing that, but that sometimes happens with fresh eggs that were laid this morning as well. Anyway, so this allows me to preserve our excess eggs when we have more than we can use for times of year when we don't have as many as we could use. That would be the reason to do this. So real quick, that one held perfectly. To do this, you need fresh and unwashed eggs. Eggshells naturally have something called a bloom on them. It's a protective coating that gets put on the egg as part of being created in a chicken. And that seals up the shell. If you buy eggs in the States from any commercial grocery store, they are washed. If you're watching this from anywhere else in the country, or anywhere outside of this country, you're probably not familiar with that because I believe most other countries do not do that because it's too dangerous to wash the bloom off. It allows bacteria and such to get in to the egg. But anyway, you can't do this with washed eggs. So for us, we don't normally wash our eggs, but we do certainly get some that when I pick them up out of the coop have got mud on them. Like at this time of year when we get freezes and thaws and stuff, chickens have mud on their feet, and so we get some mud smears on the eggs. Sometimes you get poop smears on eggs. These kinds of things happen. We use those, but I don't use those for water glassing. So I just pick the ones that look perfectly clean when they are laid without any washing and put them in lime water. And that's what was done 2 years ago to these eggs. So now I've cracked 5 here and only one did the yolk leak, but it looks to me like I nicked it with the shell edge because of the way it is leaking out slowly. I don't think the yolk was actually not strong enough to hold. We're going to check a few more of these. That one, the yolk was weaker. I did not nick it with the shell and it split. And there's nothing wrong with that. It just happens as eggs age. So this is interesting because I haven't ever had any that I kept for 2 years. This little jar I kept mostly as an experiment because we didn't need them last year. We used a lot of our water glassed eggs last year, but we had more saved than we actually needed. So I thought, why not just let them sit on the pantry shelf for another year and then we'll see what it's like. I don't think there's any particular reason we should ever need to store eggs for 2 full years because normally that cycle of heavy laying and slow laying and so on happens once every single year. So this is just kind of an experiment to see what the results actually are. That one, the yolk completely disintegrated. I could see the yolk was actually soft, like getting liquid in the shell before I even cracked it when that started to peel open. So right now I have got 5 that did not break and 2 that I think broke on their own and 1 I think I broke. Is my proportions in here. So if I hadn't broke that one, I'd be back to 6 and 2 on my proportions here. And again, there's nothing wrong with that one, held perfectly. There's nothing wrong with using those for a scrambled egg or something if they're not quite as fresh, and you certainly can't fry them as a sunny side up or something like that. One other thing I will note is to keep them this well, you don't need to refrigerate or keep water glass eggs cooled. That's part of the advantage of doing something like water glass, and it can just sit on a shelf. I will, however, note that from other people's descriptions I've heard, the cooler of a shelf you have for your eggs to sit on, probably the longer they'll store fresher. I haven't experimented with that, but I have had friends in warmer climates whose shelves are naturally much warmer get yolks that break apart faster. So I'm assuming that's because it's breaking down a little faster. Our pantry is very cold. It's usually 40-something degrees on the pantry shelves, so that's the temperature these have been sitting at for most of 2 years. Sometimes in the summer the pantry warms up a little bit. Sometimes it gets down into the 30s, but without freezing. So anyway, that is the conditions that these eggs have been under. That one, again, was broken inside the shell already. I could see the yolk had softened. So definitely, even though I'm still getting more than half of my eggs here to hold as a intact egg, I wouldn't count on having more than maybe half still holding their yolk shape from what I'm seeing here at 2 years old. And that one again was broken. It's leaking slow, but I could see it was, I think as much as anything, the yolk had adhered to the side of the shell, and right where I pulled it open, it kind of broke the yolk itself. Because then an egg sits in one position, which it has for 2 years in this lime water, it can have that happen. Anyway, so I've only got a couple more eggs in there. Now that I've stirred up my lime, I can't see exactly how many I have left, but that one was also broken inside the shell. So as I'm getting to the last couple here now, my proportion is ending up being more like half and half. I've got 1, 2, 3, I've got 5 in there now with broken yolks and 7 without, so it's still not quite half and half. And of course, for a lot of things you use scrambled eggs, so that's no issue. That one was also broken inside the shell. So as I understand it, the reason this works is the powdery lime that you can see stirring up in here. It did look more clear. This is my last one before I mixed it up. Kind of coats an extra seal onto the outside of the eggshell, which already has its own natural bloom seal, and then this one is broken inside too. So that it just works. It allows them to store without needing to refrigerate or dehydrate or anything else for a good long time. I know some people will do this in like a 5-gallon bucket. If you have a big family and you have lots of eggs, that could be fine. But if you break one in there, it can kind of contaminate the rest. So I prefer to do smaller containers. Even my one sister, they have several children. Her children handle the eggs, and some of them are young, and so they're not always the most gentle. And I believe she does all hers in even smaller jars than this. She does them in just quart jars so that there's not too many eggs in any single jar to get broken or bumped at once. So the proportion I ended up here with is I have got 7 intact yolks and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 not intact. So that averaged out to being half and half on 2-year-old eggs. Can't tell it. 7, that's the one I think I broke on the shell edge. 7 eggs that did not hold their yolk, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 that did. And if the camera will let me zoom in here closer, if you can see on eggs like that one right there, the intact one, you can kind of see a little bullseye spot. That is because it's a fertilized egg. As far as I know, that doesn't make any difference on the nutrition one way or the other, but we have adult roosters that run with our flock, so all of our eggs are fertilized. So if you don't see that fertilized bullseye on your eggs and you don't have a rooster, that would be perfectly normal. We have those little fertilized bullseyes because these are fertile eggs. Now I can totally beat these all up and make a souffle or an omelet. I might make a custard here, but this was mostly an experiment because I was really curious to see how they held up after 2 full years of being stored. So that's pretty impressive. These did not have to be refrigerated, and I would have had plenty. We did have plenty, that's why we didn't use this jar, to make it through the whole lean laying time of the year again and go back to the heavy egg laying time. So I thought somebody might find that interesting. I was just interested to see what they look like after 2 years, and there is the answer. So maybe that inspires you to maybe try water glassing some of your own if you have your own chickens, or if you got a friend or neighbor who's got extras at this time of year because they have more than they can possibly use, if they're willing to get some to you that are unwashed, which if you have a local farmer's market or something like that, even if a lot of people sell washed eggs there regularly because that's what a lot of Americans are used to. In my experience, a lot of them are more than willing to sell you unwashed ones if you let them know ahead of time you would like that. They're quite happy to do that. Mixing up this water is super easy. You can go back to one of the other videos I did, but I can't remember at the moment if the proportion is 2 tablespoons or 2 teaspoons of lime powder to a quart of water. You just shake it up, set your eggs in here, pour the lime water over it deep enough to cover it. Very simple. That's all I did. These have now sat on the shelf for 2 years, and that's what they're like 2 years later. So hopefully that's interesting info if you've ever thought about doing this.
Thank you everyone for watching. It means a lot, and I hope you learned something along the way.
If you know somebody else who would enjoy this as well, share it with them.